So after removing the seats in a previous interior disassembly episode, this episode is going to be all about cleaning the fabrics. So starting with the rear seats out, and this one's the longer rear seat, it just gets held in place by these metal clips that pull the fabric taut around to the back side of the seat. The metal clips clip the fabric onto these metal bars that are thicker and round the back. There's a bunch of different locations, but all of them are fairly self-explanatory and you will be able to figure out where they go. Once you've unclipped this fabric, underneath that one, there's a further 4 over here. 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then this little plastic clip that holds in the seatbelt holder over here. There's also this one little mounting with 2 bolts over here, which is where the seatbelts come through and mount up. So I disconnected that and the latch that sits on top of those that latches the seat down when you fold it down. Once you've unclipped all the clips from the rear side of the seat, you can fold the fabric around to the front and unclip some clips at the front. I'll show those clips when I'm putting it back together because it'll make a lot more sense coming from there and it's a lot easier to film where they are. I will also be showing all of the different seats and how to do each one specifically. But for now, for this rear seat, the general gist of it is once you've got the fabric out, you can wash it in a basin, which I did wash them initially in a washing machine, but I would recommend just doing it in a basin. You could be more thorough while also being more gentle, and then you can massage the foam that's within some of the fabric and make sure you get it all nice and clean, much better than a washing machine can do. So really, I would just recommend doing it this way and you can see why. After years of use, you can imagine all the dirt and sweat and everything that builds up in the fabric and foam, and of course you can see how filthy this water gets washing all of that out. I found the best way to clean it was sort of just to massage the foam and the fabric, which works the soap through all of the dirty material and gets it as clean as you can get it. After that, of course, because it's soapy, you'll want to rinse it out with some fresh water, and in between those 2 steps, if you're up for it, you can also put a bit of a fabric conditioner on, but that's not necessary. Once they're clean, they'll just be looking and smelling a lot better. You don't have to condition them, but it is an optional additional little step. To show what I mean of why I was showing these front clips where the fabric would have been in the way, and this way it's much easier to see. On the front side of the seats, in between the foam, there's these little rails, and that's what the metal clips for the front side will be clipping the fabric onto. So you can see where they run through a bunch of the places on the seats, but it's also very self-explanatory where they go. They are sort of pulling the fabric taut into the foam and giving you the design that the seats have. The clips that clip onto these rails are the exact same as the back side, just these little metal rings. You can see what I mean by it's quite self-explanatory for the top and the bottom, and then the armrest also has its own fabric, which I'll get to in a minute and explain a bit more thoroughly. So on the top side of the seat's fabric, you can see these plastic rails that have a metal rail through them. This is what's clipping to the rails within the seat's foam. So this is what's pulling on the other side of the fabric through those lines and pulling it into position. So essentially, all you're trying to do is connect this rail to that rail with something. The best thing I find is a cable tie, because most people just won't have access to the metal rings that the manufacturer uses, and plus they're plenty strong enough. On the front side, you can see where these lines will run, running through the middle and the sides over here, and then the seatbelt hole is also fairly self-explanatory, how that will pull to the other side with those plastic clips that I mentioned a bit earlier. On the top part of the seat, you can see where the armrest will fold in. That bit actually has a thicker plastic clip, which I'll show a bit later, that pulls right the way through and wraps around this corner of the foam here. So you sort of just have to loop the cable ties around this little metal rail like that, and then connect this part of the fabric onto those clips. Just like this, it's really quite easy, and then you zip up the zip tie as tight as you can down to the bottom. Once you snip it off, just make sure you push on the top here and rotate it down, so any sharp bits are definitely pointing down into the foam. Even as deep as they are, you don't want anything poking you when you're sitting on top of the seat. And then just follow it around, pushing it into all of these different lines, making sure you get all of the clips. This is the plastic clip that will push through the seatbelt hole and latch onto these metal bars. So there you go, that's how you'll clip these ones on from the front side of the seats, so you'll run around and get all of those done. Just to show, this is what I meant with the zip ties. Once you've snipped them, push them all the way down so they're pointing into the foam. You can see once you've tightened them up how it pulls that fabric nicely into position and gives you that premium look. With the zip ties, this is what I did. I pushed them down and then used a little right angle pricker tool like this just to get underneath that little rail, grab the tip of the cable tie and pull it up, and from there you can fairly much feed the cable tie through and pull it up with your fingers. So it's really quite easy to do. Once you've zipped them all up, then you'll just use some snippers like this and you can just compress that foam down to where you can cut it nice and level. And you're fairly much always working from the inside towards the outside of the seat. That way you don't miss any clips and it also makes it much easier to access everything. Once you've done that, you can pull the fabric and it will go pretty tight, but you can pull it over this little bracket over here, which is what holds on the top half of the seat and hinges at that point. Follow the fabric around, pulling it around all of the foam, and then we'll go to the back side. On the bottom of the seat, you can see all the holes where the cable ties will line up, and it is fairly self-explanatory. You can just follow the old holes and you can see where it will quite obviously reach onto certain bars. These are the plastic clips from those seat belts pulled through onto this side, pulling them nice and tight. And now you can just follow it around, getting all these little ties into position. There is certain holes that aren't for clips, but those are for the little bolts that bolt on the bottom plastic cover when we're done here. So you can follow them around with a cable tie attached here and just pull them as tight as you want or are comfortable with. Obviously the factory metal clips are very small, so they fairly much pull it as tight as it can go, but it's up to you how tight you want to make it and where you want to pull your fabric just to get it how you want it. And then this is the little latch bit with those two little bolts that bolts in over here. I haven't got the seat belts in at the moment, but there will also be the seat belts two little metal bars that come in underneath that little bracket and bolt up into here, just beneath this latch over here. And then when the seat folds at these hinges, it also has this little gas strut that just supports it. And so when you put on the plastic cover, that gas strut just has to be passed through this hole before you put the cover on. And then that cover is super easy. It's just 1, 2, 3, and 4 bolts in the corners, and that holds on that bottom cover. This is what all the cable ties will look like in position, so you can see where I've attached all of mine, but you'll also have the reference of when you took them apart. You can see what I'm talking about with the metal clip here, of how tight you want to go with it. The metal clips are obviously very tiny, so compared to the cable tie, you can fairly much pull the cable ties as tight as you can, and that will be the same as the manufacturer did it with those metal clips. Once they're all done up, you can see I've just snipped them, and it all looks nice and neat, just like the factory did with those metal clips. Once you've finished up with those ones, then there's this little fabric which just passes under here that covers over the bottom and just makes it look a bit neater. So this one will have an additional few clips that hold it in position, and then the seat belts pass through a little cut in this fabric, and this is where those little brackets join up underneath this little latch, where you can see it's just beneath these two little bolts that clamp it all together onto this metal bar. Those seat belts pass through and then pass onto the front and operate as normal. With attaching these little clips, you can just punch a little hole through this fabric or try and find where your original ones were and just attach it onto the rest of the frame in a fairly obvious way. This is what it will look like. On the side here, this one also had a place for the fabric to attach here, so if you want to save one cable tie, instead of snipping it straight away, just wait until you folded this fabric up just to put on this one cable tie on the right hand side over here. And that's the bottom of the seat done. Moving on with the top part of the seat now, which is the same concept but different design with the same metal rails that run through it. The top cover for this one is slightly different. It has the same rails that connect to those ones in the seats, but this design is different with some zips and other little clips for the armrest that's in the top half of the seat. There's quite a few of these hard plastic ones that just fold through and clip onto the frame of the top half of the seat, and then when everything is all done, there's a flap over the back that comes down and zips down the back of the seat. On the bottom, there's this plastic sort of clip that folds up and finishes the look. There's two pieces that fold together, and you sort of have to do a double fold. It's not just one fold, which would give a decent sort of finish. You actually have to fold it twice for it to give that seamless look. For the armrest, these are the hard plastic clips that I'm talking about, and there's clear slots through the foam that you can see where they go through to get to the other side of the frame where they clip on. There's also just a pivot point for the armrest and a place for the bottom part of the seat to bolt onto. With it all clipped in, you can see what I'm talking about in the armrest, where those hard plastic bits pull this fabric through here, and you just have to be careful to get the fabric behind this little pivot point for the armrest. Moving around to the back, you can see these various little plastic clips that pull through their various respective lines, where you can see the top one pulls down and clamps onto here, the side one pulls through and clamps onto this bar, and this bottom one pulls through and clamps onto there. There is a fourth one, but I just had it out the way to show that one, and that one pulls through and clamps onto this bar over here. You can see then on the back side of the seat where you've got the zip part that folds over and zips up now. On the side of the seat, here's the one little bolt hole that went with that side piece on the bottom of the seat, if you remember from earlier. And then I'll show how the armrest attaches in a little bit. On the back, there's this little foam fabric that just covers some of the rails and makes it a bit softer from the rear. And looking at the top of it, there's also these little mounts for the headrest, which push through here. Towards the top of the seat, where there's plastic clips that clip in the headrest here. Everyone knows where a headrest goes in, but through the top here, there's plastic bits that you'll push through these little holes. There's holes in the fabric. It's very obvious where they go, but it's handy to see where they pass through, and you can see where those clips will go through. These are the clips I'm talking about, and they just have this little shoulder that clamps onto those little metal receptacles in the frame of the seat. So once you've unzipped the back of the seat, it's super simple and super easy to squeeze these and just push them out the top. And once you've done that, then you can pull the rest of the fabric off without ripping the fabric around the tops of these little clips. On the bottom side here, there's just little bits of fabrics that you just have to be smart with and just fold up under here. And there's two little zips along the side here that just zip it up into place. You can see this little foam bit that just covers some of those metal rails just so you don't bump it with your knees and have it being super solid when you're sitting in the back of the car. On the side here, there's this little mechanism which is part of the little actuators for the bottom of the seat to fold the back of the seat down and fold the seat up as a whole. And the whole hinge point also just goes along with this side of the seat here, which is just one little bracket over here. At the back of the seat, here's it all zipped up now, looking nice and neat. Once you've finished up with those zips, you just push them in and they fit in nicely into that little zone. And then on the bottom here, you can see the fold that I was talking about earlier, where you fold it over once and actually fold it a second time, and that's what gives you this seamless fabric look. If you only fold it one time, you'll know you've done it wrong. You'll be able to see what I mean. But this is that factory look that you're going for, where it's very seamless and you almost can't tell that it's there. On the top of the seat, you can see these plastic clips that are pushed in for the headrest now. Sometimes the fabric will get caught a little bit under them, so you can just squash down the foam on the sides and make sure that you're not pinching any of the fabric. Also then, with these little clips, the clip part of it will always be facing towards the outside of the seat, because that matches up with the metal bars of the headrest when these push in later. So you can see here what I'm talking about. When you have the headrest in place, the little notches for these clips for your headrest adjustment will always be facing towards the inside of the seat, so that little plastic piece will always be facing towards the outside of the plastic clips. The cable that's on the mechanism for the top part of the seat is connected to the latch on the bottom part of the seat. So obviously that will keep it together when you disconnect this mechanism. So on this mechanism, there's just one bolt there and one bolt there, and that's all you have to disconnect, because earlier on you would have taken off the handle here and the handle here, and then taken off this plastic cover, which I find easiest to pull from about here, because there's a clip about here, and that just gets it off nice and easily. So you do that once you've got the handles off, and then you can disconnect those two bolts and this whole side will be disconnected. On this side, there's just one bolt which will have a plastic cover over it, so you just take that off and take him out, and then this side will be disconnected because this is just a little pivot and support point for this side, and this is the mechanism and support point for this side that lets the seat pivot up and down. And then there's just a little plastic cover and plastic insert on this side around the bolt that just makes it nice and smooth when it's pivoting. So that's that side. When you put this plastic cover on, make sure you put this side on first around this handle, and then follow it around, making sure it's in place. There's that plastic clip I was talking about earlier, and then there's just one screw that holds it in over here, and then you can put on your handles. They're also fairly self-explanatory, just one screw, and there's two little dowel pins that lines it up for you onto the handle. At the back, there's also a little dowel pin, so make sure you get it into that little slim area over there, and then there's just one screw that holds on this handle as well. At the back here, make sure when you put it on, you get this metal clip lined up onto the plastic housing so that it actually seats all the way on and covers these gears and things properly with that little protective cover, because if you don't have it on right, you'll be able to tell because it won't be pushed on all the way, it will be sticking out a little bit, and this little rubber flap over here won't be covering the mechanisms right, and it will be a bit of a pinch hazard. So make sure inside here, it's a bit hard to film, but there is a little clip that will clip on nicely over there, and you'll be able to see when it's all the way in position. And that's all done and put together. Now with the armrest, there's an internal metal frame, the foam on the outside, which is two separate pieces. They're a bit stuck together right now, but there is two pieces there. You can split them in two without damaging the foam at all, but just be careful or you might rip the foam. Once you've got them apart, they will fit around this metal frame, one on one side and one on the other, and then the fabric can be put around this foam on the frame. The fabric will get quite tight when you're pulling it around, but it is doable. On the foam piece, once you've got it around the metal frame, I've just got my marking. On the inside, there is this little metal tab, and on the other side, it's just flat. So how that relates to the fabric is, on the fabric part of it, you can see that flat bit on the frame will line up with this flat plastic piece over here, and the black part has this little slit for that little metal piece sticking out on that frame. And then when putting this fabric around the foam, I put this small side of the fabric around the big side of the foam first. It will be very tight, especially when it gets to these shoulders, but it won't rip, as long as you're gentle of course, and you'll manage to pull it down onto the foam. You should be able to squish down the foam. It is a pretty hard one, but you should be able to do it. And the only other thing you have to look out for is these little metal clips that go into these holes when you get to the end. Just make sure you're getting the fabric past those little metal bits without ripping anything. And then there's just two holes, the one that will line up with this one and the other one that will just attach it onto the rest of the seat. Okay, got the fabric over the foam in the metal frame. What I do is I pull like this. I'll have it up and I'll pull this side from the sides though, because these are a bit stronger to pull than this and I don't want to rip along any of these. So I'll have it up like this. I'll pull this side, flip it over, pull this side like this, and slowly just shimmy that side, this side, that side, this side, and I do it long ways like that. It'll get to the end. Just make sure along the way you're pulling these so they don't get flipped inside. You get to the end, flip it over a little bit. All of this will line up fine. And then we'll clip this over, which just folds the two sides in, and then this black piece, and same thing as the bottom of the seat. This little white bit you fold twice like this, so not just like this, but you fold them again, and he will clip into the bottom of the black piece, and then that goes on there. Once you've got the armrest like this, on this side, with that little flap lining up with that little nook there, and this flat piece on the flat piece, There's really only one way it can go because it only fits in the gap down there. Those screw holes line up with that. You just push him in, get him in there, and he'll sit against this fabric and keep them in. And then there's 2 screws that you can only see when you pull this thing out, like this. There's the 2 screw holes there, and you'll take those 2 out and this piece will slide out, and that lets you take this whole thing apart. Now with putting the armrest on, obviously it'll have a thing on each side, a guide on each side. So make sure one of these black plastic things is on each side, and then there's one small one that will fit onto these things. So the side I would put it on this side, it's got a plastic guide to make it smoother, obviously not metal on metal. So I put it on the opposite side to this one. So whichever side of your armrest, obviously I'm just talking about side of the chair, but whichever side of your armrest that makes the armrest come out properly so that your cup holder is the right way up, so this way. Whichever side your armrest is going onto the chair is where I would put this little plastic one on the small piece that sticks out there, because that piece only has metal. So that, you don't want metal on metal. So that's what the plastic guide is for. Whereas this side already has a plastic around the whole thing for that little piece. Make sure you do it that way. These 2 bolts will just bolt that onto there once you've got the armrest attached to that, and you just push it on, it will line up with that, and the thing that keeps it on is this bracket with those 2 bolts there. Now, with the armrest bolted on with those 2 bolts, this plastic cover, if you're trying to get it off, has 2 things that go in the bottom first, and then a clip at the top. This one's a bit scuffed. It was a bit of a pain in the ass to get off, but so I would try to get the top off. There's nothing on the sides, and the bottoms, you will probably struggle to break those much thicker bits. So if you just do those from the bottom, like that, to put it back on, and then clip the top. That's the armrest all put together. Now, it's just this one black cover. On the bottom of the seat, you just put this cover back on, and you put the gas strut through there so that he runs through that channel there. Once the bottom black plastic cover is on with 1, 2, 3, 4 screws, this gas strut going through that crevice there, and that open obviously for clipping on later. With this gas strut, it can be quite hard to compress him down just to get him back onto there. So what I do is I take out this rod that runs along there. It stops this going any further back, so you can make this further up. Put this rod on, put him on with his washer and nut. Then it's much easier to pull this whole thing back and squeeze him back down. Then when you pull him back, push that rod back through. Be careful, don't get your fingers caught in there. He'll hold himself in. Then you just put your little clip back on, and that's him fully done. And then small things, just don't forget about your bump stop with one little pulling strap on there. Then he's ready to bolt back in. Obviously when you bolt him back in, probably do so up straight, because these springs will have quite a lot of tension on them. It'll be a little bit hard to fight. So got him back on with that one rod being pulled out there. Put that little nut back on, and then you just got to pull it and do that. It's a 2-handed job. When you're taking this clip off, either wear some safety glasses or be very careful, because they can absolutely fling off and you'll lose them in your garage. Ask me how I know, but be very careful of your eyes. When you're putting him back on, it's easy just to put it back on, put a little screwdriver on top of him, bang him down, he'll sit back down.
On the driver's seat now, to disassemble that one, you just disconnect 4 bolts in the corners. So this one that folds up into there, that one that folds up into there, this bottom one which folds up like that, and this one that folds up like that and bolts onto there. So just those 4 bolts, and the whole bottom of this seat is now loose and ready to come out. Just before you could do that, on the side here, there's these little rotating handles that just go on here with a little clip. So there's a little C-clip on here that you just have to pry out. I did it with a little right angle tool like this, which was super handy. You do have to get right up in there, which is why I found it handy to use that little right angle tool, which can just slip down the side there quite easily. After that, there's only this one little handle on the side, which is quite easy. It's just the one screw into the side of it, and that gives you enough room to slide this whole seat to the side over here and take it off, which is just a bit different from the passenger seat, in that the passenger seat doesn't even have these side little bits. Once you've disconnected those 4 bolts on the bottom, it just comes straight out. But even this one is very simple. No need to remove anything other than these 3 things on the side and the 4 bolts on the bottom, and then this seat just comes straight out. So after wiggling it off these side little bits here, I just forgot to mention there is the one little seatbelt clip over here, which I just unbolted from here by 1 bolt. You could try disconnect it from this little clip up here, but it is a very weak little plastic clip, so it might be quite difficult. So once you've got that little seatbelt bit off, then it gives you enough room to slide it to the side and get it over these little pieces over here. And after that, you've got the whole bottom piece out as one big unit. Then you can just take off all the clips around the back of it that just clip on and hold the fabric onto the back of this frame. And then just around on this side, there's just a few more of those hard plastic clips that fold over this metal bracket over here. So after taking out the bottom part of the seat, I've just laid the top part of the seat facing forward like this, and this is the panel that you'll take out to start disassembling the top half of the front seats. So this little panel just has 2 hooks at the top like that, and then 4 clips that push down into here. They are a bit of a pain in the ass and they are really hard to pull, but you do just pull them, you will probably break them, so you'll have to replace them with a different kind of clip that can also go here. With the woody type material, if you happen to break that, a handy little tip is around this material, which you can see is quite strong anyway, because you can see it's quite reflective, so it's either got glue or resin already in it. But if you do damage this woody material, what you can do is put super glue around this hole, and that'll strengthen the whole area for when you put in your new clip and go to push that in. You do have to pull quite hard on these 4, but that is just how you do it, and then the top just folds out and pulls out the bottom. After that, you've just got these little plastic bits on the fabric that clip onto the metal rails, and at the bottom you've got those same little metal clips. So once you've undone all of those, you just fold this bottom bit down the bottom like this, fold the side bits to the side and the top bit up over the top. Underneath this one, the headrest clips are a bit harder to see, but it's the same concept as the rear seats. You just have to reach up in here, and then you know what to do now. You just squeeze those bits and push those plastic clips out the top of the holes in the metal rails that those slide into. So moving around to the front, when you're disassembling it, I would advise pulling from this side first. It will get quite tight when you get around to these top corners, but you can pull it over just by squishing the foam down. And once you've done that, then you can see the familiar plastic rails that join onto the metal rails inside the foam, and these are the little clips that you need to snip with a wire cutter, just along this edge, that edge, and one through the middle, and then you can take this fabric off and give it a good clean. Just to show, on those plastic rails and the metal rail with those little rings running through it, these are the side cutters that you'll just have to squeeze in past the foam here and then snip them. I would advise investing into a good pair of side cutters from a good brand, because they are very hard stainless steel, but you can cut them. When you're putting it back together, you can put metal rings back around it with something like a fence wire attachment, but that is very difficult to squeeze in this tight area, and cable ties are very strong and will definitely not be the weakest link. I would say the weakest link is probably this metal wire being held into the foam, so I think it'll be totally fine to hold these lines and just pull them into the foam where they're meant to be, like you can see along the side here, and then through the middle where it holds it into its structure. On the bottom part of the seat, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 clips. And then on the side, you've got these plastic bits that are built into the fabric, which just hook onto a part of the metal frame. And then there would be these additional 2 that just hook on this bottom part, but the fabric of mine ripped, so I'll just punch new little holes when I put it back together and attach it to these little attachments here. So with them all undone, this is what it will look like. And then I can show you what these little plastic rails look like. So these will obviously fold over and onto this metal frame. And once you've undone them all, then this whole fabric can just fold around to the front, where you can then detach it with the same sort of system as this plastic rail, just on the front side. And then on the front side of this one, you just detach it in a sort of square, so it's very easy on these front seats. With the front seats, I would start at the back of them, undo this wire, because then on the sides, there's a metal wire that runs in a sort of U shape over here. It's all one piece, but you unclip all of those, and then you can take this whole fabric out and give it a good clean off the car. This is what it looks like when it's all off, and you can see what the foam of the seat looks like. If you noticed any rust on the frame of the seats, the foam and the frame are no longer attached by anything, so you can actually just pull the metal frame right out, give it a scuff up, and give it a good paint job.
Go that one, move this one goes on there, this wraps around, this wraps around, this wraps around, there's nothing there, there's that one, there, that one up there, that one up there, that one up there, that one onto there, that one long, that one onto there, that one onto there, and I think that's about it. That's the whole bottom of that seat done. When you're putting on these side things, there's actually, obviously in this thing, there's a groove that runs straight, and that's what clips over that. So the clip will go through there and onto there. So what you can actually do is simply put this clip on already and have it on there, and then this has got a tapered end. So what you can do is just put it on that and then just push it right on, and I'm sure that's what they'll do at the factory, and that makes it super simple. This is what I'm talking about. You put it in the clip, you get it ready on there, give it a push, and then there you go, he's on. When you've got the chair facing you, the long notch on the front will always be the thing pointing forwards. On the back, there's no notch. This will always be pointing forward, and this thing will always be facing the outside of the seat, because it actuates the inside metal clip that goes on the headrest, which all of the headrests, the front two just have this little hole in it that lets it breathe when you put compression in it. But relating to that little clip, the notches for that are always on the inside of the headrest, so that outer bit that pulls it will be on the outside, because this will always face forward with that orientation. These still haven't had a clean yet. These will be the last thing that gets cleaned when these are all done. These I couldn't figure out a way to get this fabric off, so I'll just clean them as it is. The foam in here seems hard enough that I don't think it'll get saturated, and you just take it fairly easy and make sure you dry it thoroughly. Leave it out on a line in the sun for maybe 1 or 2 days, and then it should be all good.
The next episode is going to be a mini bonus episode on how to install a front mount intercooler just before we get the block back from the machine shop and we can move on with the more exciting part of the build, the engine build. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.